Before I started my transition, it was a really rough time for me. I was incredibly dysphoric in my body. I had really bad depression all throughout middle school and through most of my high school life. I was actually suicidal a couple of times. I didn't go through with it, and eventually, over time, I kind of came to the conclusion that maybe there's something wrong here, and through a bit of research, my junior year, I eventually found the definition for the word transgender, and I immediately thought, okay, that's me. We need to get this done. We need to start moving down this path and make sure that I'm not depressed anymore.
Transgender is a term that's been used in a wide variety of ways. It started being used as a way of describing people who maybe didn't transition but didn't think of themselves as cross-dressers. That was a very specific meaning in the 70s, but it's come to mean it's an umbrella term for anybody who's born in a gender that doesn't suit them.
For me, it just kind of means that I was born just not correctly. It's almost like a birth defect in my mind. Like, oh, something went wrong, so now I have to fix it and move forward with that and try to be who I can.
The question still remains about whether or not the death penalty is a form of cruel and unusual punishment, which is discussed in the 8th Amendment of the Constitution. We spoke with Stuart Brush and Walter Everett, whose sons were both murdered in Connecticut. The deaths of Dean Brush and Scott Everett have strengthened the views that these men hold. Brush described how his son was killed.
The last job that he got was delivering pizzas for Domino's Pizza in Bridgeport. And so he got the job on Monday. He started work on Tuesday. He turned 21 on Thursday, and he was shot to death in a robbery holdup on Saturday. 3 minority boys got in, asked him for a ride. The boys instructed Dean to go to a lonely part of the city, and there they held him up and they shot him 3 times, but the 4th bullet went through his brain. Neighbors heard the gunshots, and the ambulance was called, and Dean was dead on the scene.
Both men find consolation in their line of work. Stuart Brush is a minister at the United Church of Christ, and Walter Everett is a retired United Methodist pastor. Their experiences have solidified their opinions on the death penalty, which fall on opposite extremes of the debate.
One, I do find that the death penalty is accepted by the Bible itself. I like the one in Mark 9, verse 42, where Jesus says, "If you offend a little child, it would be better for you if a millstone was tied around your neck and you were dumped into the depths of the sea as a penalty for," now that's the death penalty.
I've always been opposed to the death penalty. In fact, I can remember giving a speech in a college public speaking course in 1953. When I spoke against the death penalty in class, I got a reaction as if it was to say, huh? It was like nobody thought that was an issue. But I felt it was an issue because I've always felt that we don't have a right to take anybody else's life, no matter what they've done to us.
Here in Great Barrington, on December 14th, 1992, Wayne Lowe, an 18-year-old student, used a SKS semi-automatic rifle to kill a professor and a student and wound 4 others. Lowe is now serving 2 life sentences in Cedar Junction, a maximum security prison in Massachusetts. Kevin Larkin was the police officer who talked Wayne Lowe into surrendering.
I was the only one in the station. The phones were ringing, parents were calling, news organizations were calling, and on top of that, the shooter called me. I said, well, why did you do it? He says, I don't want to talk about it. I said, well, why did you call? And he said, because I want to give myself up. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you something. Unless you do exactly what I say, we're going to kill you. We were getting the officers in place. We had one on each corner of the building. And I said to him, now, you have, again, I said, Wayne, I said, You got to do exactly as I said, or we're going to kill you.
But the many new laws adopted throughout the country have not prevented more recent school shootings. In 2012, 20-year-old Adam Lanza killed 20 children and 6 adults in Newtown, Connecticut with a gun legally purchased by his mother.
Nicole Hockley, whose son Dylan was killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting, talked with us about how the event affected her life.
The way that I look at life has completely changed. How could it not, in all honesty? You know, one morning I'm putting my boys on a bus to go to school, and after that I only have one child. Life changes on a dime.
Without a doubt, valuing life went up after it. My son was in the 4th grade that day. He wasn't harmed physically, but I can tell you to this day, in fact this weekend, he's afraid of windows. And, you know, an 11-year-old boy shouldn't be afraid of windows.
I've been incarcerated in over 25 different jails, prisons, or county jails. I've been locked up in about over 10 different states, and that's from Vermont all the way to Oklahoma City.
Over 300 million people are currently living in America, a number equivalent to 5% of the world's population. Despite this figure, we hold 25% of the world's prison population. Of the 2.4 million people incarcerated, the country currently displays a 50% recidivism rate.
My name is Roland, Whitley. I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I probably hustled for almost 20 years, and I really could tell you that what I actually gained that I still have now is a criminal record out of all that. Prison does not correct you. You must correct yourself, and they don't have it set up for you to correct yourself either.
Students, even if they're under 18, are still citizens, and citizens should have the right to say anything that they want as long as it doesn't violate some other rules, such as you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. What happens, as is true of a lot of blogs, you know, there's a place for comments, so you post your comments, and several people wrote comments, well, several, 3. One of them, who was later identified as a fellow student, did refer to the superintendent in a even more derogatory fashion. I mean, you know, we could debate about whether or not calling someone a douchebag is better or worse than calling him a dirty whore.
I think the biggest obstacle of high school is just the fact that everyone knows you're different and that people can oppose you strongly, and that guys, especially guys, think that I'm attracted to them, every single guy, and that's what really makes me angry, because even in class, it's weird if I have to sit down next to like a different guy. They're always, why are you sitting next to me? You like me. And that's a lot of the problem. It's always the guys.
Had an incident in Oshkosh where a young man was beaten up on Christmas Day on December 25th, 2011. He was beaten to the point that he required emergency brain surgery that night after coming outside of a gay bar. The 2 men who beat him up, who are now sitting in jail, 2-year sentence, by the way, who are now sitting in jail, I could probably place, if I were to be a betting person, I would place money on the fact that that bullying didn't start that night. And that was the extreme form of bullying. Something along the way, somewhere, they began bullying somebody who might have been gay or different than they were. And without keeping that in check, without anybody holding them accountable earlier in life, they got to the point where they thought it was okay to beat a man to the severity where they broke his jaw, where he had brain swelling, where he had all of these things happen to him, because they thought he shouldn't be gay and he shouldn't be, you know, out in a community just being who he is.
Nothing is ever done. My biggest concern is that, I guess, we'll start stepping backwards, because I know we're moving forwards, but it's hard to. And there's a lot of opposition, I guess. So my fear is that, or my concern is that we'll start stepping backwards again. It's just probably my biggest fear, is to be afraid of having to walk alone.